Hi, I'm Chef Nicholas Lodge, based in Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm excited to share with you in this video the use of CSA Sugar Art products. I have actually used CSA products since the late 80s. Eileen Walker, who was the original owner and developer of CSA Sugar Art Company, I started using them and working with Eileen and using her products many years ago. So obviously CSA was the first company in the United States to start manufacturing Lustre Dusts and Petal Dust for the commercial cake industry, cookie and cupcake industry. And I'm very excited in this video to share with you one of the particular part of the extensive range. In this particular video, I'm going to concentrate on the use of the Ultra line. Now the Ultra line, these are FDA compliant and kosher certified, so totally edible. All right, now this is a very important part with obviously any dusting powder you're going to consume. So especially when we think of things like cake pops, cookies, cupcakes, or on cake parts that you're actually going to consume, it's really important that you use edible product, okay? CSA also produce like edible dusting powders, so these are non-shiny, all right, and there is a separate video on how to use these. These are mostly used for obviously dusting sugar flours, but also used sometimes as an alternative to airbrushing for shading cakes, and also can be mixed with alcohol or other ingredients to make obviously a paint. So, and sometimes on figure modeling used, for example, for blush for cheeks, for makeup and things like that on figures. And then this is the these are non-toxic. So these are lustres, but these are non-toxic. Now non-toxic means that that is okay to consume in very small quantities, all right? But if possible, I always, when I'm using, especially on something like a cookie or a cupcake where a consumer is going to consume the whole thing, I always make sure everything is totally edible, okay? But Lustre Dust can be, again, used dry, or they can be used with obviously other applications, as I'm going to show. So really, when I show in this video how to use the Ultra line, you could replace that with the Lustre Dust, but remember, these are non-toxic. The Ultra line is totally edible, okay? And then there's also the highlighter, which is also a separate video where I'll be showing how to use highlighter. Now highlighter are metallics, but these are only used for decoration or removable pieces. You wouldn't use this on something you're going to actually eat, okay? A lot of people, unfortunately sometimes, companies mislabel things or put things that are edible that are not edible. The nice thing about CSA Sugar Art is you do have the backup of all of the obviously foundation of what everything is made from. So obviously you have all the FDA compliance here. They have certificates for every single dust they have produced. So this is available to customers as well as obviously to consumers. CSA Sugar Art, for those of you watching that maybe have a cake decorating store, they also do customized packaging and labeling as well, and also customized colors. For consumers, for, as I said, retail consumers, if you go to CSA's website, you'll be able to actually look and see where you can buy these products. So for example, my company, International Sugar Art Collection, we do sell quite a lot of the CSA range, and I use most of these in my classes. Now, as I explained in this particular video, I'm going to talk specifically about the Ultra line. Now you can see here the Ultra line. This is a range of incredible colors, all right? So here obviously you've got the sort of the blues and greens and aqua colors, and the sort of blushes through to the rose gold and pink, and I'm going to be showing some of those individually in a minute. Obviously like the mauves and the silver, and then the sort of the beiges through to the sort of apricot tan colors, and sort of pale yellow through to darker golds, okay? Now, when using the dusting powders, I found that generally I use a little small opener you'd use for a soda can. That works really well to get the top off of those, and it makes it very easy to pop them off. And when you put the lid back on these, just make sure you really put the lid back until it clicks, all right? So just make sure it actually clicks, because you want to make sure you don't put this away and the lid comes off, okay? So very easy to use. You can use your fingers, but as I said, if you especially have arthritis or have a little issue with your fingers, you know, just use a little opener like that. And as I said, this is a really easy way to get the lid off of these, but because they're nice and tight fitting. Now, when we use the Lustre Dust, all right, the Ultra line, I said these are, as I said, totally obviously edible line of colors, all right? And I'm going to start off with actually this color here, which is called Sea of the Sand. This is almost like a sort of an ivory color. Okay, and now the first way I'm going to show you how to use it, I'm going to show you multiple ways of applying this and using different techniques. First way I'm going to show you is dry. Okay, now generally speaking, when I'm using, let's say I was going to use this sort of ivory cream color on a wedding cake, and I was going to brush this onto my fondant, I was going to brush this onto my bows, I was going to brush this onto my jewelry pieces. I would normally make those in a sort of an ivory creamy color. So this is just made in a creamy color. So if like this was a little brooch or a medallion on your cake. And so if you were going to cover your cake with rolled fondant, you'd use a cream or ivory, and you would also use obviously modified fondant or 50-50 paste colored cream or ivory for bows. Because when you dust, you always want to have a paler version of what the dust is underneath to get that nice sort of subtle and also nice depth of color, okay? And you'll see that a little bit more on some of the other colors. Now, when we dust, of course, you know, if you were doing small pieces like this, you could put them on some paper towel or onto a piece of paper, onto a napkin, and use that. And generally, when I'm using dusting powders, I would just use a napkin or a piece of paper towel. Now, I never take powder straight from the pot, all right? So I never take powder straight from the pot onto there because you're going to get an uneven amount. So normally I take a little bit of powder. Now you could, if you're just doing a very small application, you could just put some powder onto a napkin like this. If you were doing a larger amount, you can put some into a little container like this, and then when you finished with the dust, then this makes it easy to then put it back into the container. Okay, so like if you're putting it into there, and I'll show you some of the container ones in a little while, but if you're just dusting a small application. And I'm just using a soft brush. Generally, type of brush I would use would be sort of a soft synthetic brush used for like craft application. So anything you generally buy in a craft store, this would be used for acrylic type paints. So just a soft brush is what we use. And we're going to use this and just going to brush this over the top of the surface of the, you see I'm using like a little bit of a scrubbing action. All right, so when I'm doing sort of smaller pieces, I would just use a scrubbing action. Now, when you use the powder dry, it's going to give you a very subtle effect, all right? So, and I'm going to show you different options to give a more intense luster. But when you use the powder dry, it will give you a soft effect. Now, when we are doing large surface areas, so for example, if you were going to say dust a whole cake or you're going to dust drapes, a lot of times I use a pump brush, all right? These are actually used for mineral makeup. And this particular one has got the CSA pearl in here. This has got pearl dust. So when I'm, for example, in classes, when my students are dusting drapes and bows or the whole of a surface cake, you can either do this with the cuff down. So that means when you're doing, for example, like you're just doing a stencil or you're doing a small surface area with the cuff down, that will give you a sort of like an intense, so you see you've got like a sort of an intense pearlescent look onto there. And then when you do like large surface area like a cake or a drape, you just would pump this just a little bit so the color comes out. Then when you're doing the pearl dust, you see the pearl dust would go over the whole surface. Obviously I'm just showing you this on gray, but on a white surface, and you get that pearlescent look onto your cake, all right? So that would be how you do that. And these come empty and you just pop the top off of these, and a lot of sugarcraft companies sell these. It's called a pump brush, okay? But that's a great way to apply the color to a large surface area. And the reason is with the bigger the surface area, the larger the brush you're going to use. Because if we use the brush like this, which I've just used to say dust a cake, you're going to get like stripes on it, okay? So you want to use a larger brush so you get more of a surface, cover of the surface area, okay? So that's sort of how you use the powder dry. And of course the powders, of course, come in lots of colors. So you've got different intensity and things. And but as I said, generally when you're using it dry, that's going to give you a very subtle look, all right? So it's going to give you a more subtle look. Now the second one I'm going to go on to is I'm going to show you using alcohol, all right? Generally vodka is what most people use, all right? Vodka is a clear alcohol. Obviously there are other clear alcohols like tequila, vodka, gin, also white rum as well, so some people use that, but this, as I said, is just vodka, which is what most people use, and generally just use a cheap brand of vodka. Now generally when you're painting, you want to use a little dish, all right? You can also do this obviously on a plate and then just wash this. And if you're doing a color on a regular basis, what a lot of times I do is I just mix it in a little dish. I'd put this in a small little zip top bag, and then I just put it in, you know, and then when I want to reuse it again, I just add more alcohol to it. So you're not really wasting the product. On this particular one, I'm going to use a pink, all right? So I'm going to actually use this color here, berry pink. Now again, you can see I'm actually going to paint this onto a pale pink. Because just like when you paint a wall of a house, okay, if you were painting a wall of your dining room red, you're generally going to put a primer on of almost like a terracotta red color. It gives your red much more intensity, all right? If we started off with white and we painted pink on top, it's going to be a lot more subtle, okay? If you start off with pale pink and you paint pink on top, you're going to get more intensity and depth of color. So I'm going to just take a little, you can use like a little mini knife, a little small spoon, something basically just to put a little bit of the luster in here. A little goes a long way. Okay. And then these are all water soluble, so you can just, keep a container of water, so you just wash your brushes out, obviously with water. And then I'm going to take some alcohol, all right? So I'm going to use here some alcohol. So this is some vodka, and generally I use this in a dropper bottle. All right, I'm just going to put a couple of drops of vodka onto here. All right, I'm going to just mix this through. Okay, so you can see how you mix this through. So you're going to get this nice, and you see when I do the pink on the top here. Now, generally, if you're going to do like something that you're going to paint all over, I would use something like a toothpick, or here is my little companion tool I use for flower making, because what this does, this will obviously enable you so it doesn't move around, okay? But you see how when you paint with just paint all over, you see how you're going to get this sort of beautiful, and you see how that's going to give you a much more sort of intense pink. Now, if you did the same on white, okay, so we did the same on white, it's still going to be pink, but it's going to be a paler pink. So sometimes you're going to start off with white, or sometimes you start off with a paler version of what you want to end up with to give you obviously a more intense color. But you see how much more the pearlescent part of it, and then if you're doing small surface areas, you can do this. And then the same thing if you were doing the surface of a cake, you would obviously with that you would put you would use a larger brush, okay? And then the other thing is when you're using a brush and you're brushing the surface of a cake, you don't want to sort of come back on yourself too much, because as the alcohol starts to evaporate, then what happens is that you're going to start to get streaks and it will pull the luster off. If you need to do a second coat, best thing to do is wait for it to dry and then go over with a second coat, okay? So that's my second option. Now, third option is using Everclear. Now, Everclear is a grain alcohol, all right? This is very unique to the United States. This is basically not available outside of the United States, but it's something we use a lot for painting, for airbrushing. So Everclear is a high grain alcohol. It's actually used in manufacturing also of lemon extracts and extracts as well. So this means this dries more quickly. So if you were doing a project, and especially this is what I use if I was painting onto royal icing, okay? Because royal icing, if your liquid is too wet from the vodka, it would actually dissolve the royal icing. So let's say, for example, this is a royal icing flooded cookie, all right? So this is flooded with royal icing. And then what I want to do there is I'm going to use the rose gold color. Now, rose gold is a huge trend color, and this is this CSA Sugar Art one is a beautiful rose gold. But if I was going to use rose gold to paint onto a royal icing cookie, okay, and this is also applies like if I was using gel colors or Lustre Dust or Petal dust and painting on royal icing, I always use Everclear, not vodka, okay? And so what you do here is, again, it's going to just take a couple of drops here. And then we're going to take a brush here. I'm just going to just mix this up with my brush. But what it means is if you are going to be painting onto a cookie, and you're going to just sort of paint a design onto here. I'm just going to do like almost like little leaf shapes or things like that. Because the Everclear almost evaporates instantly, this means it's not going to actually like dry it's not going to dissolve the royal icing underneath, you see? So you see how you're going to get this nice painted effect onto there. And obviously this would give you, if you were doing a monogram or painting a letter onto there, something like that, this is the technique I would use. Also on things like, if I was doing royal icing swan, and so here on the swan's beak, if I was going to paint that, I would use the Everclear, because then what will happen is it's not going to dissolve the royal icing, okay? Whereas because the vodka takes longer to evaporate, so the Everclear is a really good option when painting on royal icing especially. And I said a lot of people use Everclear for obviously when they're doing applications like on airbrushing, okay? So that's our next step application. Now the next one I'm going to show you is going to actually be using some vegetable shortening, okay? So what we call vegetable shortening, you can use coconut oil. In Europe we call this vegetable fat or white fat. All right, so vegetable shortening. Now this is an alternative also in countries where you can't use or consume alcohol, like the United Arab Emirates and certain other countries I teach in. I can't use alcohol. They don't consume alcohol or sell alcohol. So obviously using vodka or Everclear and even lemon extract. Remember, lemon extract is about 90% alcohol. Okay, so a lot of people think lemon extract is not alcohol. It is. It's basically grain alcohol and lemon oil. So vegetable shortening is something you can use. I'm going to show you here a little bit of like a stenciling. So if you were doing a cookie, now typically what I do is I keep a designated brush for this because when you're using vegetable shortening or coconut oil or fat, you're going to get like the fat is going to get into the bristles. That means that if you try to, even with washing that, it's always going to be a bit oily. All right, and so you just wash this with a little bit of dish soap and then you can just keep this specifically for the shortening technique. So I use this quite a lot for stenciling. All right, it's a nice way if you're using powder colors for stenciling. What the vegetable fat, a little bit of vegetable fat is all you need, but what that does is it's going to give you more of a thick mixture, and so when you then stencil, you're not going to have the issue with the loose dust coming off. So I'm going to take a little bit, I'm going to actually use this color here, which is going to be ocean green, which is this beautiful color. I'm going to put a little bit of this, and again, this could be done in a little dish or obviously on a piece of wax paper or parchment paper. And then you're just going to take just a little tiny bit. You need very, very little of this, all right? Just going to mix this up. So really, as I said, you're using a very, very tiny amount of the vegetable shortening or coconut oil or fat. This is a solid fat. You can use high ratio shortening. And in here, I've got just a little bit of fondant rolled out. And you see then when I go over the top here with my brush on top of the stencil. So what this is going to do, you're still going to get the nice luster, but what's going to happen is it's going to be, and this will dry, you know, because you're putting it on very, very thin and you're using just a very, very tiny amount of vegetable fat. So this would dry. So if you were doing, say, a cookie, you could use this technique on a cookie, and then you could actually, you know, use this, for example, for a monogram. So then when you take this off the top, you see how that's going to give you this sort of stencil design. So of course this could be cut into for the top of a cookie, this could be a monogram, and this could be, as I said, would be an alternative, especially if you're working with a client, or as I said, those of you in countries where we don't use alcohol, all right? Because most cake artists typically will always use vodka, all right? But as I said, there are a lot of alternatives, that's why I'm showing you all these different techniques, all right? Now, next thing I'm going to show you is going to be lemon extract, okay? So I'm going to use this blue color here. So this is shows rolled fondant cookie, all right? So I do a lot of my cookies with rolled fondant. And lemon extract. Now, when I'm generally painting with lusters, personally, a lot of times I like to use lemon extract. And the reason is lemon extract, you know, this is the Nielsen Massey brand, all right, but in the ingredients here, it's 90% alcohol, natural oil of lemon, and a little bit of water, all right? So this is, as I said, got lemon oil in it, all right? This lemon extract used in baking and things. And, but lemon extract is, because what happens is when you're using, these are all lustre dust, when the actual alcohol evaporates, the oil of the lemon will keep the luster more shiny, all right? So actually I prefer using lemon extract as to using alcohol, okay? Like vodka, because vodka will go more dull when it dries, lemon extract will give it a little bit more of a sheen. And when we use this technique here, going to use, so again, a little bit of blue here is going to be taken. So I'm going to take a little bit of the blue here. This is a celestial blue, which is a really pretty blue color. And then here I'm going to use lemon extract. Now again, with most of the things I like to use dropper bottles, because you can imagine if you take this and you pour this, you're going to get far too much out. So most of these things I use dropper bottles, and you can buy these from specialty cake decorating stores and online to fit different size bottles. Now remember, when you're working with Everclear and you're working with lemon extract, these are both grain alcohol, high alcohol content based products. So they evaporate very quickly. So don't mix up too much at a time because it will evaporate very quickly. All right, but so, and again, so you're gonna put just a couple of drops into here. And of course, this tastes really nice as well. I'm just gonna mix this in here like so. And you see then when you paint with the lemon extract, so see you're just going to just paint this in to the, I'll just show you part of this butterfly here over here. But you can see how you're going to get this sort of beautiful, look on the butterfly. And I said when that grain alcohol evaporates, you're going to still have the nice luster from the blue, see? But you see how quickly that's dried, you see? Whereas vodka would take a lot longer. So this is good for, as I said, especially when you're painting onto, and if you don't have Everclear, those of you who are watching this in countries where you don't have Everclear available, this will be an alternative to on royal icing as well, because this is basically like 90%, so you could use this also to paint royal icing pieces also. Okay, so this is using lemon extract, and then using obviously the Ultra. Okay, remember all of these are convertible in using Lustre Dusts as well, and also Petal Dusts also. Okay, so that's going to be this one. Now, next one I'm going to show you is going to be using the, I'm going to show you how to use the Lustre Dust with piping gel. Now, a very big trend at the moment are a lot of these, for example, this is sugar press products. You know, these are companies that produce these. So a lot of cake artists now use these on cake boards and things like that. So one option of these is, once you've embossed this, is to paint it in. But if you want to have more of a sort of a luster, what you can actually do here, and this will actually stay, you know, this will stay shiny, that is just to mix the Lustre Dust with piping gel. Okay, so you just would take some piping gel, and then to the piping gel you'd add a little bit of color here. I'm going to put in a little bit of the green, this is the green onyx color here, so you just would put a little bit of that into there, and got a little bit in there already, but you just mix this through. So what you're actually doing here is you're making like a pearlescent, so you see how you actually will get like a pearlescent piping gel. So you see how it's actually pearlescent, so it looks sort of shiny because of the pearl dust that's in there. And then you can either paint that in, so you can either use a fine brush and you can paint that in, you can put it into a needle syringe. All right, so this is a syringe I use a lot, all right, for this type of application, because it's easy. You just actually do this, and then alternatively you can also use a small piping bag. I'm just going to show you a little piece of this. So I'm just going to use a small bag here. So I've just put some of that mixture into the bag, and you see then what you would do here is you just would then pipe. So when you then pipe into there, and then you just take a paintbrush, and with your paintbrush this would just sort of blend in, and you just would fill in the cavity, because when you emboss this into the cavity, you've got obviously the depth there. And you see this would then, if you did this in gold or in silver, this would stay shiny. Now this one I did yesterday, and you can see it is dry, okay? So I thought we're using piping gel, but after about 24 hours, the piping gel will dry, okay? So if you were using this on a cookie or whatever, just do these you know, like a day before, and they will be dry and then not sticky, okay? So that is using piping gel with Lustre Dust, all right? So you can see there's lots of different options, so you're not just limited to dry or with alcohol. Now, next technique I'm going to show you is going to be using oil, okay? Now, you can use any like flavoring oil, all right? This is actually like pure lemon oil. This is like a Loran oil, which is obviously very popular here in the US, but obviously there's many different companies make flavoring oils. But this is natural oil of lemon, and this would be used in chocolate manufacturing, in different flavors for cookies and things. And then you can also buy like artificial. This is actually an artificial flavor orange oil. For painting, it doesn't really matter, okay? When you're using obviously in cookies or flavoring in cakes, I would recommend the pure oil, but for here, you can use natural oil or artificial oil. Now, you could also use lemon, you could use lime. These oils come in different obviously flavors. I generally use orange oil, all right, but I said lime could be all used as well. Now this is really good when you're using, when we're doing a large surface area, because it goes on very fluid. Alcohol, whether you're using vodka or Everclear lemon extract, or especially the lemon extract and the Everclear, dry pretty quickly. So you sometimes get like a very streaky look to it. But so using obviously the orange oil or the lemon oil, you're going to get a nice fluid look to that. Okay, so I'm just going to pop that onto a napkin here. Now again, when you're making things silver, you always want to start off with gray. Okay, when you make things gold, you always want to start off with yellow. Okay, so that's a very important tip I will share with you. So when you're doing, say, you're going to paint a whole cake gold or silver, you want to use gray fondant or yellow fondant. Okay, if you're making gold bows, gold letters, yellow, you're making anything, you want to use gray. Okay, and there are companies like Pro Gel have a gray gel color, but also you can use a little tiny bit of black, okay, just to make a gray base color. Gain the intensity of your color, and especially in the video I'm going to show using the highlighters, which are the sort of the decorative use only ones. That's a really important point there I would share about obviously metallics. All right, but anyway, so I'm going to use here the this is the gray color. I'm going to use the coin silver. So remember, these are all the ultra line. All right, so these are all totally edible, FDA compliant. Now of course, when you look at the silver here and the silver here, all right, this is a real like metallic silver, but this is not an edible. All right, this is used just for pieces that you can remove from a cake. All right, this is a non-edible silver. But unfortunately, as I said, a lot of people use this for things they're going to consume, and you really shouldn't. All right, it should be on things that are just able to be removed from a cake. All right, but as I said, so this is the coin silver, and so on this coin silver. So like if I was doing, say, jewelry pieces on a cookie or doing something like that, I would generally use the coin silver one. So this is the coin silver, okay? And this is going to be your orange oil, all right? And then with your orange oil, when you paint with that, just use a brush and then just use a little bit of dish soap just to sort of clean that oil out of there, okay? You don't have to keep a designated one for that, but as I said, like you would with the shortening. So you see, so you mix this with the oil. All right, and you're just going to add enough oil to this. Now, when you're using this, again, you see what I could do is you just literally, when you finish with this, you could just put this little dish into a zip top bag, and that's what I do. And then next time I need that, all I need to do is just add a little bit more orange oil. You're not going to waste then by washing that all away or throwing it away. And then again, I'm going to just use a toothpick. Just hold this. But you see how beautiful this silver looks, all right? Now remember, this is totally edible, all right? So if you were doing cut out letters for a cookie, but you see how much the oil is very easy to work with, and it's because it's very fluid. So if you were going to paint a whole cake, all right, with this, then of course you just would use a larger brush. So you use like a larger, like a flat brush or a pastry brush, and brush this over the surface, all right? And that would be brushed over the surface of that. But you see how you're going to get this nice silver here, and having the gray underneath is really that's the tip, the big tip I'm sharing with you is starting off. And a lot of times my students are sort of amazed by some of these little tips because they're things that they've never thought of or things that they've struggled with at home. And but this makes it really easy to use. But you see how you're going to get this beautiful silver here, obviously using starting off with a gray base, all right? And if I was going to paint with the golds, all right, so if I was going to paint with either of the two golds here, I'd start off with a yellow base. So this is the yellow here, all right? So this would be the yellow you'd use for the gold, okay? Now, when you're working with generally orange oil, and you're working with extracts and you're working with alcohol, you have to be really careful on things you're going to handle, all right? So for example, if you were making something like this and you're going to then stick this onto your cake, if you pick this up, the natural oil in your skin will take the powder off. That also will happen with Lustre Dusts as well, okay? So generally you either want to put gloves on, or an alternative when you're handling things once they're dry like letters or that, just use a pair of tweezers, okay? So you don't physically ever want to pick something up that's got Lustre Dust on it, because you will pull the Lustre Dust off, whether you're using the alcohol like the vodka, the Everclear, or the orange oil, okay? Now, another alternative, and this is going to be the last variation I'm going to show you, is actually using confectioner's glaze. Now, confectioner's glaze, you know, there's different companies do confectioner's glaze. This is a food grade shellac, so it's used in panning machines for, in the US, candies like Cinnamon Red Hots, M&Ms, they use panning machines, but confectioner's glaze is a food grade shellac, and this is used to give things high shine. So we use this for berries and eyes and things like that. Again, I have this in a little dropper bottle. This is the easiest way rather than pouring it. So you notice everything I have in dropper bottles. Now, this is when you mix the glaze up, so you can actually use like a little small container, like a little portion cup with a lid on it, and then again just put that in a zip top bag, and you can keep that as long as it's kept airtight, or you just buy a little jar with a screw top lid, and you can actually mix this up as a mixture and keep this. Now I'm going to use, on this one, I'm going to use some of the confectioner's glaze, and I'm going to use here the Egyptian gold, all right, Pharaoh's gold and Egyptian gold. So you see, like, obviously one is a little bit more yellowy, one is a little bit more sandy color. So again, you know, depending what color you want to use, all right. So I'm actually going to use, I'll use the Pharaoh's gold here. And so what I'll do is I'll put a little bit of this into the container. But as I said, you could do this in a container that has a lid on it, and then that way you can just store that. You take your confectioner's glaze. Okay, and I'm going to add my confectioner's glaze here. So what you're really making here is like an edible nail polish, okay? So this means when you're doing letters, when you're doing things like jewelry pieces, you're making brooches for a cake, for example, then it means you can actually handle those and the gold won't come off, all right? Now, when you do this, all right, you're going to use, there's two options. One of them is to use a disposable paintbrush. You know, these are very inexpensive to buy. They're just used for crafts and things. So basically what you do is you'd mix this up with your disposable paintbrush. You'd paint this onto the project, all right? And then what you do is you just would throw this away, because confectioner's glaze is not water soluble, okay? So that means the confectioner's glaze, you can't wash this brush in water, because the glaze will, as I said, will just seize up. So that's one option, all right, is to use a brush like this. The second option is to use put this over here. The second option is to use a regular brush, but then what you would need to do is you need to clean that with, for example, like a glaze thinner. This again, you know, different companies have thinners for confectioner's glaze. You can also use like an isopropyl alcohol, rubbing alcohol. This is actually like an acetone-based product. You could use acetone or non-acetone nail polish remover as well, or a paint thinner, okay? And what this is going to do is this would then just be painted. And so when you paint this on the top of the piece here, so the advantage of this one, once this is dry, this gold will not come off, all right? So that means that you could use this for, as I said, for a jewelry piece or for lettering pieces, and you can handle these afterwards and use these. And again, you know, as I explained, because these are edible, they're not going to have that really bright, shiny gold that you would have with the highlighters, all right? Because remember, those are non-edible ones. But when you're using this for an application like, say, on a 50th wedding anniversary, for a cookie, for the lettering or something, you know that that's a totally edible product, okay? But so then what you would do is you take a little bit of the cleaner and put it in a little, and then you just would clean your brush, okay? And you just use that to clean your brush, and then obviously that would mean that your brush would be clean. And so that's sort of how you would use that, and just let that dry. And then of course you would take that, and then you would put this, once it's dry, you would just I'll put this on a piece of paper. You just would put that somewhere to dry, and then once that's dry, you could actually handle this. So we could pick this up with our fingers, and we could push that onto the cake. You could obviously pick up your letters and things like that. So I hope you've enjoyed this presentation showing how to use the CSA Sugar Art Ultra Dusts, and I look forward to seeing you in some of my other videos showing some of the other amazing products from CSA Sugar Art. Until next time, this has been Nicholas Lodge, Sweet Wishes, and I'll see you real soon.